They thought she was just another woman they could intimidate, but they didn't know she was trained to break bones. Where are you watching from, and what time is it right now? It was supposed to be an ordinary Wednesday night. The air was calm, the streets dimly lit, and the city just beginning to settle into its evening silence. Danielle Carter had just wrapped up teaching her weekly women's self-defense class at the community center. Her students, mostly high school girls and single mothers, had left empowered, laughing, hugging, and promising to practice the techniques she had taught them. It was something Danielle took pride in, giving women power they didn't know they had. At 33, Danielle wasn't just a martial artist. She was a third-degree black belt in Taekwondo, certified in Krav Maga, and a licensed instructor in women's tactical defense. She'd been training since she was 12, not to fight, but to protect. Her classes were never about aggression. They were about survival, control, confidence. And for women like her, black women, who too often face harassment, fear, and systemic disrespect, it was about standing tall. Danielle packed up her gear, tossed her gym bag in the back seat, and started her drive home. The roads were mostly empty. A soft jazz playlist hummed from her speakers as she turned onto Brookshire Avenue, a quiet residential road just 2 miles from her apartment. That's when she noticed it. Flashing red and blue lights in her rear-view mirror. Her stomach clenched, not in fear but frustration. This wasn't the first time she'd been pulled over without cause. And she knew the drill. Keep your hands visible. Speak calmly. Don't move too fast. Hope they're not the type looking for trouble. She pulled to the side, turned off her engine, and kept both hands on the steering wheel. The first officer approached from the driver's side. Young, white, maybe mid-30s. His nameplate read Thompson. His partner, older and bulkier, circled around to the passenger side. Neither looked friendly. Their posture was already tense, rigid. Danielle took a breath. Good evening, officers. Is there a problem? She asked, voice steady, eyes forward. Thompson didn't answer immediately. He shined his flashlight directly in her eyes, then swept it around the car interior. License and registration, he barked. Danielle didn't flinch. Sure, I'm reaching for my glove compartment. Slowly, she said, narrating every movement. Thompson grunted. Do it. She handed over the documents. He glanced at them and muttered something under his breath before walking back to his cruiser. His partner, Officer Reynolds, stayed near the passenger window, eyes narrowed like he was trying to smell guilt. Where you coming from? Reynolds asked, his tone already accusatory. Danielle looked at him. From work. I teach self-defense classes at the rec center. Self-defense? He repeated, a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. Like karate? Taekwondo, she said, among other things. Reynolds didn't respond, just stared, as if trying to size her up. Then he turned and murmured something into his radio. A few minutes passed in silence. Danielle kept her hands on the wheel, her breathing even, her posture upright. She knew this game. Intimidation. Stalling. Fishing for an excuse. Thompson returned, his face now twisted into something smug. You match the description of someone we're looking for, he said flatly. Danielle's eyebrows lifted. Oh, what description is that? Black female, early 30s. Driving a gray sedan, he replied. That was it. No mention of make, license plate, or actual reason for suspicion. That's incredibly vague, Danielle said, unable to hide her sarcasm. Step out of the vehicle, Thompson snapped. For what reason? She asked, still calm but firmer now. Thompson's jaw tightened. You're being uncooperative. Get out of the car. Now. Danielle reached for her phone. I'm recording this interaction for my safety. Put the phone down. Reynolds barked from the other side. I'm well within my rights, she replied, phone already in hand. The screen lit up. Recording. Thompson yanked at the driver's door handle. It was locked. Danielle didn't move. You're escalating this, not me, she said, the camera now capturing his face. Thompson pounded on the window. Step out. Now. Behind her calm exterior, Danielle's mind was calculating. Her training kicked in, not physically, but mentally. De-escalation first. Stay centered. Assess the environment. She saw the tension in their posture, the aggression brewing. These weren't officers looking to protect. They were looking to assert control. Still seated, she asked again, "Am I being detained or arrested?" "You're resisting a lawful order," Thompson growled. "No, I'm questioning an unlawful stop," she said, voice steady but low, camera still rolling. "And I'm not resisting. I'm just not surrendering to abuse." That's when Reynolds rounded the car. Without warning, he yanked the door open and reached in to grab her arm. Danielle moved quickly, not violently, but decisively. She twisted her body, slipped her arm out of his grasp, and stepped out of the vehicle. She stood tall, 5'9", athletic, balanced. Her stance was calm but ready. "I've stepped out," she said clearly for recording. "I am not resisting. I am asking for a supervisor." Thompson stormed toward her, hand reaching for his cuffs. She raised one hand. "Do not touch me without cause," she warned. "I've done nothing illegal." But he didn't listen. He grabbed her wrist, jerking it back. In that split second, Danielle made a choice. Not out of anger. Out of survival. Her body flowed into motion, years of muscle memory kicking in. She shifted her weight, twisted her hips, and used his own momentum against him. Thompson found himself stumbling forward, landing hard on one knee as she deflected his grip. Reynolds lunged in, but Danielle sidestepped, grabbed his arm, and locked his wrist into a basic control hold. She didn't punch. She didn't kick. She didn't strike. She restrained. Trained precision. Controlled force. Both officers were stunned. So were the three people who had pulled over nearby to watch. One had already started recording. Danielle backed away, hands up. "I am not resisting," she repeated for cameras. "I am defending myself against unlawful force." Thompson scrambled his feet, furious and red-faced. "You're under arrest." "For what?" "Because you couldn't handle a woman who knows how to defend herself." She shot back, the fire now visible in her eyes. Reynolds started yelling into his radio for backup. Danielle stood her ground. She wasn't running. She wasn't hiding. She had followed every rule. She had spoken with clarity. She had acted only when forced. Within minutes, 2 more squad cars pulled up, but this time they were met with witnesses. A woman from the sidewalk pointed her phone at the arriving officers. She didn't do anything. They attacked her. We got it all on camera. A teenager waved his phone in the air. "Yo, she flipped that cop like in a movie, bro." He came at her first. The officers paused, now suddenly aware that the situation wasn't what they expected. One of the new arrivals, an older black officer, approached Danielle calmly. "Ma'am," he said, "I'm Sergeant Harlow. Can you explain what happened?" Danielle nodded, camera still recording. "I was pulled over for no reason. I was compliant. When I asked for a supervisor, they tried to force me out of the car. I stepped out. Then one grabbed me. So I defended myself. I have everything recorded." Harlow looked at Thompson and Reynolds, who were now flustered and bruised, and then at the bystanders, phones out, cameras rolling. "We'll review all footage," he said. "You're not under arrest. Please stay on the scene." Danielle nodded. Her heart was still racing, but her breath had returned to rhythm. She stood still, watching as the officers argued among themselves, whispering, gesturing, realizing the narrative had slipped from their control. She watched as the crowd grew. She saw the flashes from camera phones, the murmurs of awe, the whispers of, "She's a black belt," and "She didn't even swing. She just moved." Danielle sat on the curb, calmly, upright, phone still rolling. She didn't need to explain who she was. They messed with the wrong woman. It was quiet now, not the silence of peace, but the tense hush that follows a thunderclap, when everyone holds their breath to see what happens next. Danielle sat on the edge of the curb, her phone still recording, her body still alert. Around her, flashing lights painted the street in pulses of red and blue. The crowd had grown. Neighbors had come out. Drivers had pulled over. And every single one of them had a phone in hand. Danielle wasn't just offending herself anymore. She was becoming a symbol. And she knew it. Officer Thompson paced like a caged dog, his pride clearly wounded. His partner, Reynolds, was off to the side with a supervisor, gesturing angrily and trying to spin the story. But it was too late. There were too many witnesses, too many angles, too many people who had seen exactly what happened. Sergeant Harlow stood calmly in front of Danielle, arms folded. "Ms. Carter," he said, "we're going to need to get statements from everyone here. But I want to assure you, this is not going to be swept under the rug." Danielle looked him in the eyes. "I've heard that before." He didn't deny it. "I get it, but this time there are eyes on us. A lot of eyes." And he was right. Before the other officers had even arrived, one of the teenage witnesses had already posted the video to social media. Within minutes, it was going viral. By the time the first local news van showed up, hashtags were trending. Hashtag wrong woman. Hashtag black belt justice. Hashtag Danielle Carter. Back at the scene, Danielle finally stood up. Her phone had stopped recording for now, but it wasn't put away. It stayed in her hand like a shield, a reminder that she wasn't going to be silent or invisible. Harlow motioned toward his vehicle. "Would you be willing to come down to the station to make a formal statement?" Danielle paused. Her instinct screamed not to trust it, but she looked at the cameras, the lights, the people. "Yes," she said, "but I want legal counsel, and I'm not going alone." "I wouldn't expect you to," he said. "You'll ride with me, and we'll wait for your lawyer to meet us there." Her lawyer was already on the way. As a small business owner and self-defense instructor, Danielle had always kept a good legal contact close. She sent a quick text, and within 10 minutes, attorney Sasha Lynn was on site, briefcase in hand, heels clicking confidently against the pavement. Sasha was fierce. Korean-American, Harvard Law graduate, and no-nonsense advocate for justice. She was already familiar with Danielle's work in the community and didn't need much convincing to take her case. "I saw the video already," Sasha said as she approached. "You did exactly what you trained others to do. Protect yourself." Danielle nodded, exhaling slowly. As they sat in the back of Sergeant Harlow's cruiser, not in cuffs, not under arrest, just witnesses to their own unfolding case, Danielle took a moment to process everything. The adrenaline was still wearing off, but clarity was settling in. This wasn't just about her anymore. It never really was. At the station, things moved quickly. Sasha was there for every word. Danielle gave her full statement, laying out the facts from the moment she noticed the flashing lights to the second she was forcibly grabbed and defended herself. She was careful, deliberate, and unflinching. Sasha, meanwhile, was already preparing for war. The department launched an internal investigation that night. Thompson and Reynolds were both put on administrative leave pending review. But it didn't end there. By morning, the video had reached every major platform. Twitter exploded. TikTok flooded with duets of Danielle's calm but powerful moves. Influencers, activists, and even celebrities began weighing in. A clip of Danielle twisting out of the officer's grip without throwing a single punch went viral with over 10 million views in 12 hours. People weren't just shocked, they were inspired. Memes called her the real-life Black Widow. Others said, "That's what strength with restraint looks like." Local news anchors tried to spin the story both ways. Some framed it as a case of excessive force gone wrong. Others pushed the angle of a citizen attacking police. But the footage didn't lie, and the public wasn't buying any excuse that painted Danielle as the aggressor. By noon, she was trending globally. Danielle's phone buzzed nonstop. Journalists called. Podcasts wanted interviews. Activists wanted to meet. But Danielle wasn't rushing into any spotlight. She was focused on something bigger, protecting others who didn't have her training, her calm, or her luck. She sat with Sasha and drafted a public statement. It wasn't flashy or self-congratulatory. It was pointed. "I acted to defend myself from unlawful use of force. My training helped me remain in control. But not everyone is so lucky. How many others didn't have a camera, or witnesses, or a black belt? This isn't just my story. It's a reflection of a system that needs urgent change." They posted it that evening, and it lit the fire even brighter. Civil rights organizations reached out. Women's advocacy groups offered support. Even city council members requested a sit-down. Danielle was fast becoming more than a viral moment. She was a movement in motion. But while the public rallied, the department tried to regroup. 2 days after the incident, the police union released a defensive statement suggesting that Danielle had posed a perceived threat and that officers followed protocol during a high-alert situation. But that only made things worse. Comment sections lit up with fury. Perceived threat had been used too many times. People remembered George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Sandra Bland. Now, they added Danielle Carter to the list, but this time with a twist. She survived and fought back. That night, Danielle went live on Instagram. No press team, no fancy set, just her in her living room, speaking directly to her followers. "I'm not a hero," she said. "I'm a teacher, a daughter, a neighbor. What happened to me could happen to any woman who looks like me. The only difference is I've spent years preparing for it, but we shouldn't have to." Over 300,000 people watched live. She told her story, not with anger, but with purpose. She explained how she trained, why she taught women to defend themselves, and how it felt to look two officers in the eye and realize they weren't there to protect her. One viewer commented, "You're the voice we needed. You didn't just speak up, you stood up." Another wrote, "I'm signing up for self-defense classes tomorrow." That single live stream changed the game. The very next day, Danielle's inbox was flooded with requests to teach. Schools, shelters, corporations. Everyone wanted her to lead workshops, host webinars, build a curriculum. But Danielle wasn't looking for fame. She wanted impact. So she partnered with Sasha to launch Project Resolve, a nonprofit dedicated to teaching self-defense, legal rights, and de-escalation techniques to women of color across the country. The first fundraiser broke its $100,000 goal in 24 hours. As for the police department, pressure mounted. City officials launched an independent inquiry. Community leaders demanded reform. And the mayor, facing backlash, held a public town hall, inviting Danielle to speak. Standing at the podium, Danielle wore a simple black shirt and jeans. No makeup, no theatrics, just truth. "I didn't wake up that day expecting to make headlines," she said. "I just wanted to get home safe. That should not be a radical goal. But if my experience helps others make it home, then I'll keep showing up again and again." The room erupted in applause. But behind the scenes, the officers involved were not staying silent. Thompson had hired a lawyer. He filed a counterclaim, alleging that Danielle had escalated the situation and caused undue injury. The department, trying to save face, hinted at potential disciplinary action against her. That was the moment Danielle realized this fight was far from over, because it was never just about what happened that night. It was about what had always happened, what people looked away from, what they justified, what they normalized. And Danielle Carter was done staying silent. They thought filing a counterclaim would scare her, that threatening legal action would silence her voice, discourage the public from standing with her, and shift the narrative back into their favor. But they clearly didn't know Danielle Carter. She didn't flinch. She didn't backpedal. She stood taller. When Officer Thompson's legal team filed a claim alleging that Danielle had caused unnecessary escalation, it set off a fresh wave of outrage online. People who had witnessed the video, who had seen Danielle's restraint and calm under pressure, were furious. The court of public opinion was not in Thompson's favor. But in real court, things worked differently. Danielle sat at her kitchen table, surrounded by legal papers and folders. Sasha, her attorney, leaned over the documents with controlled focus. The stakes had just gone up. This wasn't just an internal investigation anymore. Now it was a formal legal battle. Danielle was being sued for assaulting a police officer, despite every second of video evidence proving otherwise. "Don't worry," Sasha said firmly. "This is retaliation, and it's transparent. We'll counter their counter, but we need to be strategic." Danielle nodded. "Whatever it takes. I'm not letting them rewrite the story." The legal system had a way of testing people's patience, strength, and resources. But Danielle was ready. And more importantly, she wasn't alone. Project Resolve had grown rapidly in the past few weeks. The fundraiser kept exceeding goals. Volunteer attorneys offered pro bono support. Black-owned businesses pledged donations. Even a few celebrities had quietly reached out to offer backup. The community Danielle had built through years of teaching and mentoring now stood with her, shoulder to shoulder. Still, the days ahead weren't easy. The department released more carefully worded statements, subtly trying to frame Danielle as someone trained in martial arts and therefore capable of causing serious harm. They implied that the officers hadn't realized she was a threat until it was too late. The media ran with it. Suddenly, Danielle's discipline, her years of training, her teaching, was being twisted into a weapon against her. It hurt to be punished for being prepared, to be vilified for being calm under pressure, to watch the same world that praised her one week start to question her the next. But Danielle didn't break. She kept teaching. Quietly, steadily. She expanded her self-defense curriculum, added courses on navigating police encounters, knowing your rights, and de-escalating confrontations. Women from all backgrounds signed up: nurses, teachers, mothers, teenagers. Word of mouth spread fast. In one class, a student asked, "What if I freeze? What if I can't remember the moves?" Danielle smiled gently. "Then you survive. That's always the goal. It's not about perfect technique. It's about getting home." She knew the emotional toll firsthand. Even as the internet hailed her as a hero, she woke some nights drenched in sweat. The replay of that moment, of hands grabbing her, of her heart pounding, still lived in her body. But she processed it the only way she knew how, through movement, breath, and intention. Meanwhile, Sasha worked behind the scenes. Depositions were scheduled. Witnesses were interviewed. And a subpoena was issued for the full body cam footage, something the department had so far refused to release. But once the pressure mounted, they handed it over. What it showed was damning. From the moment Thompson and Reynolds approached Danielle, their tone had been aggressive. No introduction, no explanation, just commands. One officer laughed while the other said, "Let's get this over with." Then, without warning, they grabbed her arms, ignoring her questions, ignoring her ID badge that hung clearly from her gym bag, and ignoring her rights. The footage captured it all. Sasha reviewed the clips frame by frame. "They're done," she whispered. They had assumed their narrative would win, that they could say she was uncooperative and no one would question it. But the footage exposed their lies. And when it leaked, it didn't just confirm Danielle's story. It exposed a pattern. Turns out, Officer Thompson had several past complaints. Quietly settled, quietly buried. Excessive force, racial profiling, misconduct. Nothing ever stuck because no one ever had video. Until now, the city was now in damage control. The mayor called an emergency press conference. "We believe in accountability," she said with a straight face. "We are taking steps to review officer conduct and ensure public trust is restored." But it was too little, too late. People didn't want promises. They wanted action. Danielle released a follow-up video. No makeup, no edits. Just her and her truth. "When a system tries to punish you for surviving," she said, "it's not broken. It's working exactly as designed. But here's the thing. They messed with the wrong woman. And I'm not done." It went viral again. More women shared their own stories. Some were eerily similar. Pulled over for no reason, treated like suspects, pushed before they even spoke. The comment sections were flooded with rage, with love, with solidarity. And through it all, Danielle stayed focused. The court hearings began. The judge overseeing the case was no nonsense. He watched the footage. He reviewed the reports. And he wasn't buying the officer's claim. After 3 tense sessions, he dismissed the charges against Danielle and ordered an independent review into the department's handling of the incident. Cheers erupted outside the courthouse that day. Reporters swarmed Danielle, but she kept it simple. "Justice isn't one person walking free," she said. "It's everyone having the chance to do the same." But the fight wasn't over. Danielle and Sasha filed a civil suit against the department and the officers personally. Not for fame, not for revenge, but to set precedent. to show that there were consequences, that they couldn't brutalize people and walk away clean. And as the case moved forward, Danielle's platform grew. She was invited to speak at colleges, panels, virtual summits. She trained hundreds, then thousands. She turned Project Resolve into a national campaign. And through it all, she remained grounded. One night, after teaching a class, she stayed back to clean up. A teenage girl approached her, shyly holding her gym bag. "Ms. Carter," she said, "I used to think I had to stay quiet when stuff like that happened. But now I think maybe I could be brave, too." Danielle crouched down to meet her eye. "You already are." In those moments, it all made sense. She hadn't asked to become a symbol. She hadn't planned for any of this. But life had a way of placing people in the fire, not to burn them, but to forge them. Danielle Carter had been forged, and now she was unstoppable. As her lawsuit gained traction, the city began quietly settling. The officers resigned. The department pledged reforms. It wasn't perfect. Nothing ever was. But it was movement. It was proof that speaking up, fighting back, and standing your ground mattered. Danielle didn't celebrate in flashy ways. No big parties, no media tours. She kept teaching, kept writing, kept showing up. Because at the end of the day, this was never just her fight. It was every woman's, every black person's, every citizen's who'd been made to feel small in the face of a badge. And thanks to Danielle Carter, they now had a blueprint for standing tall. You never forget the day the system finally looks you in the eye and says, "You were right." For Danielle Carter, that day came with no fireworks, no applause, just a quiet courtroom, a stern judge, and a ruling that echoed louder than any headline ever could. The city had agreed to settle, not just because it was the easiest option, but because they knew they'd lose if they didn't. Danielle sat in the courtroom in a black blazer. No flash, no makeup, just her natural strength. Beside her sat Sasha, calm and collected. Across from them, the city's legal team looked worn down. Months of footage, depositions, and mounting public pressure had done its work. And finally, the balance had shifted. The judge looked up from the papers. This court recognizes the harm done, the pattern of misconduct, and the undeniable proof presented. The plaintiff, Ms. Carter, was within her rights, and the defendants failed not only in their duty to protect, but in their basic humanity. It was over. The case was settled for a significant sum. Confidentiality clauses were discussed, but Danielle refused to be silenced. She waived her right to a private settlement. "People need to know what happened," she said firmly. "They need to know it cost them more than just trust. It cost them justice." Outside, reporters waited, but Danielle didn't stop for interviews. Instead, she walked straight to the steps of City Hall, stood before a growing crowd of supporters, and spoke clearly. "This one isn't just for me," she began. "It's for every person who was told to just comply. It's for every mother who teaches her child how to survive a traffic stop before teaching them how to ride a bike. It's for every teacher, every daughter, every fighter who refused to be quiet when the world told her to sit down." Cheers erupted. Some wept. Others just stood in awe. Danielle had gone from a name and a headline to a movement that could no longer be ignored. But with great visibility came greater responsibility. And Danielle knew that this couldn't be where the story ended. It had to be where it began. Within weeks, she announced the next evolution of Project Resolve. It would become a national nonprofit, offering free self-defense classes, legal literacy training, and community advocacy programs. She partnered with former officers, those who left the force in protest, who now train communities to know their rights, record interactions, and de-escalate dangerous encounters. The mission was clear: educate, empower, and expose. Cities began reaching out. Schools requested workshops. Churches opened their doors for seminars. And quietly, Danielle began building a team of instructors, women of color from all over the country, trained and certified under her new curriculum. They weren't just teaching people how to fight. They were teaching people how to live with confidence, power, and preparation. And then came the unexpected. Danielle received a call from a major university. They wanted to offer her an honorary degree, and more than that, they wanted her to teach. Not just martial arts, but justice, advocacy, resilience. They offered her a position as a visiting lecturer. Danielle was stunned. Her entire life had been shaped by movement, by the quiet discipline of breath, posture, and control. Now, she had the chance to shape minds in a different arena. She accepted. And soon, she was speaking not only to activists, but to future lawyers, doctors, journalists, and politicians. In her first lecture, she looked out at a sea of students and said, "Power doesn't come from your fists. It comes from your voice. Your ability to choose when to speak, when to act, and when to stand firm. That's what saved me. And that's what will change the world." Back home, things changed too. Danielle's gym expanded. A local business owner offered to fund a larger facility. It became not just a training space, but a community hub, a safe space where people could learn, heal, and grow. Survivors of abuse found their strength there. Kids who'd been bullied walked taller after just a few sessions. And police officers, yes, even some of them, attended sessions to listen, to understand, and to unlearn years of bias. Danielle didn't hold grudges, but she did hold people accountable. One evening, she sat across from Officer Maria Alvarez, a former colleague of Officer Thompson who had resigned shortly after the footage leaked. "I stayed silent too long," Maria said. "I saw how things worked. And I'm sorry." Danielle nodded. "Then help me fix it." Together, they launched a program aimed at training officers on implicit bias, de-escalation, and cultural sensitivity. Danielle was cautious. She knew real change took time. But even one officer change was better than none. Meanwhile, Sasha published a book chronicling the case, Force of Nature, the Danielle Carter story. It became a bestseller. Book clubs, podcasts, and news outlets covered it. But more importantly, it became curriculum. High schools and colleges use it to talk about systemic racism, gender bias, and the importance of standing up for your rights. Through it all, Danielle remained grounded. She still taught the 6 a.m. classes, still showed up to the community garden every Saturday, still walked to her neighborhood coffee shop and greeted people by name. Fame hadn't changed her, it had amplified her, and she used every decibel to build others up, but healing wasn't linear. There were still moments that caught her off guard, a siren, a sudden shout, a headline that mirrored her own. Trauma didn't leave just because justice had come. But Danielle had the tools now. And more importantly, she had a mission. One day, a young woman knocked on her gym door. She was quiet, her hoodie pulled low. She looked around before entering, unsure. "I saw your video," she said softly. I need help." Danielle didn't ask questions. She opened the door, handed her a waiver form, and said, "Welcome home." That was Danielle's gift, not just her strength, but her ability to make others feel strong, to turn pain into purpose, to transform fear into fuel. As time passed, the world kept spinning. Other headlines came and went. Other stories of injustice rose and faded. But Danielle's impact remained, not because of the cameras, but because of the seed she planted. In classrooms, in courtrooms, in communities that once felt voiceless. Years from now, people might forget the names of the officers, the legal jargon, the dollar amounts, but they'd remember the woman who didn't flinch when the system came for her, who stood her ground not just with fists, but with truth. And in every city where a girl learns to stand up straighter, to speak louder, to walk into a room like she belongs, Danielle Carter's story lives on. Because in the end, this was never just about one woman taking on the police. It was about every person who's ever been underestimated, every soul who was told to be quiet, to stay in line, to not make a fuss. It was about what happens when you stand up anyway. And that is power.